I started with just the state of inspiration, anchoring in that in all throughout the day, every day. Anytime my mind went away from it, I'd anchor it back into asking myself powerful questions. And then from inspiration, I said, but I need optimism too, because I was still negative in my thinking. And so then I just started anchoring myself in inspiration and optimism throughout the days. And then I thought, but I need something more. I need to be infused with godlike spirit. I need enthusiasm. So I kind of layered that on and stacked that on. And I was just living in those states. And then pretty soon the phone started ringing. Opportunities started coming. I was becoming more magnetic. I didn't do anything other than focus on my states.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is the Connekt Unplugged podcast, number 56, with world-renowned NLP Master Trainer, influencer, someone who has made a massive impact in the world, zooming in or riversiding in all the way from Bali, Mr. Chris Howard. Welcome to the podcast, and I'll let Kallum share with the world a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Connor. Today on Unplugged, we're joined by, as Connor said, Chris Howard, a globally recognized NLP expert based in Bali. Chris has not only trained thousands around the world in principles of influence and personal change, he's lived them. After rebuilding from rock bottom, he brings a rare authenticity to his work, combining proven NLP methodology with hard-won personal experience. Few people embody transformation at this level. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. We have a rich history that's connected, but yet not. Yeah, we've never connected, so it's great to see you here.
Yeah, finally, after all these years, our connection originally, I guess, is through Tad James. But before that, Chris, how on earth did you end up in front of thousands of people across the world? Nearly I think I read somewhere you were traveling 46 out of 52 weeks of the year. Wow, that's crazy. How did you end up even thinking about doing this? Where did it start?
I was always attracted to performance in some way, shape, or form. Like from the time I was a kid, I was doing plays and stuff like that, and was really into theater. And right out of high school, I worked for Club Med, which is a hotel resort chain. Yeah, and I was the chief of sports for them, and so I was in charge of the scuba diving, the windsurfing, the sailing, but I was announcing all the shows at night, and there was some sort of magic to that. And I loved being with people and different cultures, and I was teaching sports, and, I've been a martial artist all my life, started when I was 10 years old, and still train 2-3 times a day, sometimes today. And so I was teaching, I was an instructor, and then I was on stage. So it was like, it's kind of like how we look back on our life and we go, all these elements kind of led us to where we are now. And that's what did it, really. And then when I left Club Med, I was 24 years old and needed to start up again. But I missed that period of life between 18 and 24, where we learned how to make our lives work on our own. I never had that period because I was, basically coddled in the hotel resorts. And so I dove into personal development, reading books, got into NLP, went and trained with a number of different organizations. And then I stumbled upon Tad's organization. It was Advanced Neurodynamics back in the day.
Yeah, it was.
And I stumbled upon them, did my master level training with them in Hawaii. And then I worked for Dale Carnegie training for a year. And then I ended up getting hired by Advanced Neurodynamics and the American Institute of Hypnotherapy and American Pacific University, which were all Tad's organizations. And so I was teaching for them full time and working in the office. I was doing both, which bugged me at the time, but in retrospect, it gave me all the skills that I needed to launch my own company. In 2002, we launched, and by 2004, we were doing $1 million weekends over and over and over and over again.
Crazy.
I was teaching 22 weekends a year all across the world. But it was weird because when I got aligned with some promoters that were promoting us in different places and stuff, but because they had to negotiate the venues and the costs, it wasn't like I would go and do Melbourne, Australia, and then do Brisbane, Australia. I do Melbourne, Australia, then South Africa, then London, England, then back over to Brisbane, Australia, then over to New Zealand, then back over to the US, then back over to do another country or another state in Australia. So I was just all over the map. I mean, I remember in 2007, I was 7 weeks in the United States the entire year. I think that's what you were referring to. And I was pushing myself to limits and extremes that I shouldn't have. I eventually collapsed from all that in about 2010, but it was amazing, and it was all mission driven, and I wanted to change the world. And I still do. I'm having a blast now, and I'm back and resurfaced and doing things in a brand new way. But that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah. I want to just touch a little bit on
depth there.
I want to just touch on, you talked about $1 Million Weekends. I want to talk about those weekends, because it was the stuff of legends. I remember talking to a lot of the students that would come through, and you'd have these students that were the real go-getters of the class, and they'd say, you know what, I'm going to smash Tad's numbers out of the park. I'm going to get the biggest numbers NLP's ever seen. And then they'd say things like, what are the biggest numbers for a weekend event? And I would ask Connor, and he said, well, Chris Howard's probably got the record. He's had, he's filled stadiums. He's had over thousands of people at, it was like a secret of creating your future type weekend. I think what was it? Breakthrough to Success. Is that what you
was Breakthrough to Success. And to be fair, I was like, when Tad taught the secret of creating your future for years, and I do give him a lot of credit, in terms of the impact that he made in a lot of people's lives and stuff. And like I shared with you guys before, we had a falling out at the end, but I still, have tremendous amounts of respect for him. And so I was the first person that they put to teach the secret of creating your future for him that did it successfully. John Overdorf and Julie Silverthorne had tried to do it before, and they hadn't been able to replicate the results. And myself and another trainer named Topher came in, and I was the only one that was able to successfully pull that weekend off at the time. I think afterwards you probably had more that came in and were able to do it. And but it was a brilliant weekend. It was based on great content and stuff. And then when I launched my own company in 2002. I partnered with a guy who had built a $60 million clothing business. He had a lot of the street knowledge in terms of business building and real world business acumen. So he brought that to the table, and I brought to the table my ability to deliver programs in a stellar way that got results. And so I created Breakthrough to Success, and it was roughly, it was around the same model as Secret of Creating Your Future, which was, how do you, I talk about it differently today than I did back then, but essentially it was, how do you clear the slate in your consciousness so that you can gain massive propulsion forward? And so the weekends, we started those weekends, and I started with about 100 people inside the weekends when we first started. And it was basically, I found a lot of champions out there in the field that were wanting to help us to move it. So they were the soldiers doing that. But then I went to a T. Harv Eker seminar, and T. Harv Eker did the Millionaire Mind Weekend. I remember it was one time I was teaching for Tad still. I was teaching for Advanced Aerodynamics. I had a master NLP practitioner training that I was teaching in Seattle, Washington. We had 50 people in the room. And, I went downstairs and I saw T. Harv Eker was doing, and he was not known or anything like that, but he was doing a seminar called the Millionaire Mind Evening, and he had 500 people in the room. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, what the heck's happening here? So I'm teaching my class and I'm running back and forth to go and see. And I'm like, how the heck is he doing so well? I didn't realize that they were all there free. Right. But it was like, our people that, they $5,000 to be in the class, and his people were there free. But I was like, but then he made his offer for the Millionaire Mind Evening, and everybody ran to the room, back to the room and signed up. And I'm like, man, I got to find out what he's doing. And by the next time I had an opportunity to go to his evening, I went to go see it again, and he changed his model up, and he started doing his Millionaire Mind Weekend for free. He would give the whole weekend away. And I was like, oh my God. And everybody ran to the back of the room, and I saw this model, and I went back to my partners and the people I was doing business with. And I'm like, we have to do this. We have to model this, because this is the structure that will change it. And, we had $100,000 events, and I'm talking business here. I mean, I'm not in this. I didn't get into this for the business, but I learned that I had to understand the business and run it like the business in order to make the transformation we were making. It's like Walt Disney said, we don't make movies to make money. We make money to make movies. I had a big dream that I wanted to get out there. And I convinced all my partners, I'm like, we got to adopt this new model. And the next time we did it, we had not $100,000 event, but we had $1 million event. And then they were $1 million events like clockwork. We up to $3 million in a single event. The first time we went into London, we had 6,000 people registered at Excel in Docklands in London, and had a $3 million event. And so it was just a blast, and it was fun.
Okay.
It was this big machine that was turning on multiple levels. We had 40 full-time coaches that were coaching for us internationally. I had between 6 and 9 trainers that were training programs. So at any given time, I had 3 programs that were happening somewhere in the world simultaneously, being presented by the other trainers. And it was a lot of fun. But I also, I burned out because I was pushing myself too much at that time. So now, as I reapproach life, I'm approaching it a new way. I'm very much into AI. That's governing a lot of what I'm doing now, where it's woven into what I'm doing now. And I'm doing it in a way where, I feel good. I remember in 2006, I went to Richard Branson's Necker Island. And this is when I decided I was going to model the billionaire mind. And I fell in love with Richard's lifestyle and stuff. And so I went to Necker Island, and I went to Richard and I said, how do you handle the stress? He said, stress. He says, I don't really have any stress. And I didn't believe him. I couldn't hear that because my model of the world said, you're doing business, you're stressed out all the time. And he says, I don't have any stress. And he says, number one, I stay in shape, and that helps. And he says, but he said, there's nothing that could happen in business that's worth worrying about. He said, he said, if something happened to my health or the health of someone in my family, that's a problem, but there's nothing that could happen to me in business that's worth worrying about, which said a lot about his values. And he said, then he said, if the Virgin companies were to fall out from underneath me today, I'd just go move to Bali or something. So fast forward from 2006 to 2010, when I had pushed myself to the limit, I had this collapse. I went and I moved to Bali, and I lived in Ubud for 2 years, just, finding myself, rediscovering where and how I wanted to live. Went back to the US, but now I'm back in Bali again. I came back here last December, because for the peace of mind and the energy that I like here, and to build while I'm doing a capital raise for a new expression of the business. So I'm just having a blast now. My life's changed. It's not the same exactly as it was before, but it's been a heck of a journey.
Incredible. So you started Chris Howard Companies in 2002, and then 2010, you needed some time out. At what point what was the catalyst for that? How did you know it was time? Was it a thought? Was it a feeling? How did you know?
When you said when it was time, I missed the first part of what you said, the connection.
You said around 2010, you were feeling burned out, and then you moved to Bali and you had to sort of tap out. I mean, that's my word.
Yeah, tap out. You can say it that way for sure. Yeah. It was more than that. It was, I had, toward the end of, and we're talking 2009, 2010, I had made this decision that I didn't want to be a Tony Robbins type figure. I wanted to be more like a Richard Branson type entrepreneur. I still loved the transformation, and I had these training teams, and nobody understood they all saw me as being a Tony type guy. And I'm like, that's not me. That's not who I am. And so there was a conflict between me and my partners in terms of how they saw me as a brand and how I saw myself as a brand. And I was going out at night, and I was partying to let off steam, and I was doing it. And my business partner came to me one day and he said, Chris, you need to go to rehab. And I said, well, no, I don't, I was partying before, and I wasn't, at the time I had done a round of steroids. Like I was, I was a little all over the place. I was,
sure.
I was spread too thin, and I was living high and fast, and I was, and I had issues that I didn't see even then. But he said, you need to go to rehab. I checked in there, and then he dismantled the company, sold off the assets to all the competitors while I was in there, and took over the company. Yeah. And there was a thing where, there was a thing with the contracts that was done that was, shady and not right, but I wasn't paying enough attention to what he was doing. Yeah. And so, what happened was I basically went from millions to penniless overnight in 2010. And so it was, Yeah, it was a thought, it was a feeling, it was everything. It was like I got clubbed over the head, and I just said, okay, I'm moving to Bali, and so when I moved over there, it was for a life reset for me. Hey,
And I
Cal,
really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, welcome back, Cal. Really appreciate you sharing that, Chris, because it's obviously you've done a lot of work with yourself and you've come from good stock, but being indifferent about it now, obviously you've done a lot of healing along the way.
Yeah, it was, it was, I won't lie, it was a rough journey, and it was all part of it's all, when we look back on our lives, we have ups, we have downs, we have challenges, we have, challenges with other people. We have, just like with Tad, like I have, he and I, when we had our fallout was a pretty major fallout, but I have tremendous respect for him now. And like I say, before he passed away, I reached out to him to try to message him and never got through to him, unfortunately. But, I have, I think I have done a lot of healing along the way. It's, I have, to hold on to resentment, like they say, is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And if you're waiting for the other person to die, you're in effect because you're pointing at them rather than looking at yourself. So, yeah.
Well, see, Cal and I love hearing the stories from yesteryears, especially in our field, because we feel like there's still a huge amount of growth that NLP can do, and the more we can understand where it's come from and what people have done with it in their own little unique brand,
Right.
there are learnings peppered everywhere that all of our listeners can listen in on. About what age were you around the 2009, 2010, where things started to, because we all evolve from a humanistic point of view in our lives, and I'm just curious. Was it around the 30s, early 40s?
Yeah. Well, let's see. We're 2010 was what, 15 years ago. So I'm 56 now this year. So I was what,
41.
41. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My 40s were tough for me. Which is really weird because the 30s were, I was all over the map. That's where I was teaching, but the 40s were a tough journey because when I did move to Bali, I'll tell you, I was pissed. I was angry. I was, and I had things to hook it on, that I don't even need to go into today, but I had things to be angry about. And, so there were hooks, I had my justifications for being in the crappy space that I was in. And, you guys know as well as I do that if we've got blame, shame, justification, reasons, excuses, it's all being at effect. And so I was very much at effect, like people always are when they're stuck in a problem. And so that's where
100%.
I was. And I was lashing out at my partner. I was lashing out at the world. And so, but as long as I was doing that, I was stuck. And so I had been in NLP for so long that I could think circles around NLP. And I didn't see NLP as being the thing that was going to heal me in this space or help me to heal in this space, because I could think, like I said, I could think circles around it. So I went looking for more esoteric routes of transformation. I started to study alchemy in depth. I started to study, just forms of spiritual healing and the Kabbalah. And I started looking at different kind of ancient wisdom and that sort of thing to figure out to try to make sense of what I was going through and where I was. And I was looking at the hero's journey and, but I couldn't see the happy ending on everything that was happening for me. I just couldn't see that yet. So I could cause I was so stuck where I was. So I stayed stuck. And I tell people this, from the perspective of a speaker, you'd love to say, boy, it changed in 1 second. It didn't change in 1 second. It changed over 10 years. I stayed stuck for 10 years.
Yeah. Right.
And it changed, about 15 years in, which is after that, I said, which is more close to now. It was a few years ago, where I just said to myself, you kind of lost 10 years of your life, which I didn't, but I said, you lost 10 years of your life. Do you want to lose another 10? How long are you going to let this continue on? So it just got to the point where it's like, I'm not going to stay in this mind space anymore. But at the same time, there were things that helped in the healing. There was, I got to a point where I didn't want to live anymore after I lost everything. And I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Didn't want to get back out there. it was horrific. And so I just woke up one morning and said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on my state. That's it. That's all I can think about focusing on. I'm in a depressed state. I'm going to ask myself questions. You know, what am I happy? Not what am I happiest about? What am I most inspired by? Because I felt like I needed inspiration. And so I started with just the state of inspiration, anchoring in that in all throughout the day, every day. Anytime my mind went away from it, I'd anchor it back into asking myself powerful questions. And then from inspiration, I said, but I need optimism too, because I was still negative in my thinking. And so then I just started anchoring myself in inspiration and optimism throughout the days. And then I thought, you know, but I need something more. I need to be infused with godlike spirit. I need enthusiasm. So I kind of layered that on and stacked that on. And I was just living in those states. And then pretty soon the phone started ringing. Opportunities started coming. I was becoming more magnetic. I didn't do anything other than focus on my states. It wasn't enough to pull me out. I ended up, and this will be a controversial one, but I ended up, I started dating a Scientologist. And so she's like, you got to come into the Scientologist. And I'm like, and I avoided it for so long because of what we hear about Scientology. Finally, I went in and I took some basic courses with them and stuff. And they have a thing called life repair. And I signed up for this thing called life repair, but then it came out in their interviewing of me that I did NLP and I did hypnosis. And they're like, those are the works of the devil. You can't say
Scientologist said that about you.
But the Scientologist said that. Yeah.
It's only the other way around.
yeah, exactly. Right. And they're like, you can't be here. And they kicked me out and they refunded my $5,000 I paid them for their life repair. But somehow I got back in and I was able to go through the life repair. And I'll tell you something, it helped a lot. Now I know at the higher levels that gets weird, it gets, you know, but that one program that I did got me to cause more than anything else that I ever did in NLP, that one program. And it essentially it was like a confessional. It's like a fourth step in the 12 steps for any 12-step fans, but it was more in depth and it was deep, where you list out everything that you did that affected your well-being, actually affected your quality of life in a negative way. You know, your ability to thrive in a negative way. You're going to list everything and you're going to dump it out. You're going to purge all that. And you're going to put dates on when you did it. And you're going to label where you were when that occurred. And then, you know, after going through this processing for what must have been 12 days, 14 days, I had lists of all these things that I did to upset my quality of life and my ability to thrive, like not checking the contract, not doing this, not having a lawyer go over this, all these things. So there were actions and non-actions. And I looked at it all and it's like, how the hell can I ever think about what other people are doing or focusing on them? I've got so much to clean up in my own life. And then I just went to work on cleaning that up. And all of a sudden I was at cause and I had no more attachment whatsoever to what other people did. That was the second step. And the third step was I went to a friend of mine named Patrick Combs. And Patrick Combs is another speaker, and he is a great speaker, and he writes people's stories, and they're either their signature talk story or their comeback story. And he wrote my hero's journey story, and he could see the ending. He could see the aha I needed to come to let everything go. And he wove it into the story, and I read it and I thought, that's it. Those three things combined helped to put me on a new path because I changed the narrative. And then when AI came out, I had something to be inspired by again, you know, automating all the NLP. And then I was able to use the techniques on myself with the reflection of AI. So sorry, that's long-winded. I talked way too much. I apologize.
This is good. This is great. And I think what I love the most about it is that you normalize the fact that regardless of your extensive experience in the field and regardless of you being up on stage and delivering this to other people, you still had your stuff that you were unconscious about. And, you know, because I had this kind of dilemma that I was dealing with when, you know, people would point to the people on stage and say, well, you know, they have their problems. They're doing this, they're doing that. And how I reconciled it in my mind was that you can't ever judge anybody by their unconscious stuff, because by that same degree, you should judge yourself on your unconscious stuff. And we're all unconscious in our own way. And I feel like it was great.
It's like looking at the splinter in your neighbor's eye. Yeah. It goes right back to,
it does get a bit biblical. Yeah. But it's true because, you know, how can you possibly say they need to fix that when you haven't fixed your stuff, and despite them being on stage. And I think what happens sometimes from an archetypal standpoint, when people are up on stage, you glorify them, you put them up on a pedestal, and that's also the fault of the person that's doing that,
Right.
as well, but I think it is good that you normalize that, because there is a circle or a spiral downwards that I see some people in our field go through. And that's when, they can't fix something, or they're stuck in a problem, or they can't see outside that part they're in. And what they end up doing is they keep reframing themselves every day, and they reframe on top of reframe on top of reframe. And that actually speeds up the spiral down.
Right.
Because they start living in this falsehood, in this illusionary world. And I think hearing that from you, someone who's gone through it, someone who's been at the highest highs and then gone through those lowest lows, it demonstrates to people that that's okay. And, you don't have to have it all figured out right away. And like you said, you didn't waste 10 years of your life. You went on a journey, and it was probably the biggest self-development program you've ever done, that 10 years.
It was,
Yeah, and I think at some level you decided to go on that journey, and this is the rebirth, and this is the phoenix rising out of the ashes. So I think very highly of the fact that you've just normalized that for people, because a lot of the newbies, and I call them newbies, they've got some experience, but they're starting to get to that stage now where they feel like they can fix everything with an swish pattern or a chain of anchors and stuff like that. But sometimes you do have to go through that depth of discovery. And I guess what's also important to me, outside of the three things that you listed, those three major things, were, what else did you discover on your journey that you felt was worthwhile? You mentioned the Kabbalah. I'm sure you delved into the Paul Foster Case archetypes and Western esoteric magic and those sorts of things. Was there anything else that you felt like was really worthwhile looking into and checking out?
I think it was all worth looking into. And, Tad used to say this, that, hanging on the heiau and was the sign that said, "Think not that all wisdom comes from your school."
Your school.
And a heiau is a spiritual learning place in ancient Hawaii, right? Think not that all wisdom comes from your school. So I think that there's wisdom to be found all over the place. I think that the one thing that changed everything for me is after having those breakthroughs in thought and emotion and the things that were holding me back, and, most of it all, we can point right back to being in effect, being in effect. And I knew I was in effect. I just didn't know how to get out of it. It was like, even with all the tools, I didn't know how to get out of it. But in 2022, I was in November of 2022, I was in Poland visiting a girlfriend of mine out there. And she was a tech person. She was a developer, a web developer. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm playing with ChatGPT." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And she said, "Here it can, do this stuff." And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh my God, this is exciting." I thought, because if this can do that, if you can write a poem or write a song in an instant or any of that, we are this close to a person having a problem, pushing the button, telling the problem, and having an immediate hypnotic process delivered to them that solves that problem and up levels their consciousness. And we're there. Like now, everything that I teach, I do 4 or 5 mentoring calls a week. So every week I'm doing mentoring.
Yeah. Could you
calls.
unpack what you're doing now with the AI?
Yeah. Every week I'm doing mentoring calls, and it's all AI that I teach now. So everything is, I still run the framework of my basic trainings, but everything's amplified. So so what I started doing was training the AI how to do transformation. And then I was taking myself through the processes that I had taken other people through for years. Mm-hmm. And I had a sounding board now. That was the big problem with traditional NLP, as I saw it, was that, it was oftentimes, for myself included, we would pitch it as an all-purpose self-improvement technology. That was true, because from a generative perspective, you'd upgrade your consciousness just going through the trainings. But from a remedial perspective, you were learning how to make change with other people. But, as Tad used to say, a man cannot long be his own therapist because you can't read the label from the inside of the jar.
Hey there, this is Conor and Kallum from Connekt Coaching. Hope you are enjoying the Unplugged podcast. Nothing lights us up more than seeing businesses thrive, especially in uncertain times. We have 32 combined years of doing nothing but mentoring and training businesses from around the globe in order to increase their revenue and thrive in uncertain times. So what we would like to do is share with you a little bit about what we've discovered over the last 32 years.
We've created this amazing business model called the Forever Business Model, and we want to give it to you for free. All you need to do is jump down into the description below. There's a link there called Steal Our Forever Business Model. Click on the link. There's a 9-minute video that you can watch where we unpack everything you need to know to implement it in your business right away.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the problem is that when we're stuck in a problem, what do we do? But now all of a sudden I had an external sounding board, and I could train it with fractals of my consciousness to be able to make change like I could. And so I ended up creating 500 different GPTs that each one that's trained to do different types of things. Each one that, I've got one that will create the hero's journey story, just like it's called Reframe My Life. And just like was created for me by my friend that helped me out, this will, you go and you tell it your problem, boom, it reframes it, puts it in a new narrative. So you have this incredible new narrative. It does it in seconds. Now, if I'm designing a personal breakthrough session, which I used to, it's kind of the core thing that we learn to deliver as a service for people. Historically, it's been a 5 to 8 hour session where we spend 2.5 hours doing a detailed personal history where we find out about that person's problem, find out about the tail end of the dragon, help them to see the bigger relationship between things, and then solve that. And it becomes a major breakthrough for the person.
Yeah.
And typically we solve that through the delivery of the intervention in the second session. Well, now all of a sudden I could do that whole thing for myself. It's like you learn a technique in NLP like metaphors. And we'd say, well, it doesn't make sense to write a metaphor for yourself because you've already figured out the meaning of the metaphor. You're not fishing for the meaning like you want somebody to do. So it's not inductive learning like you want them to get, where the egg cracks from the inside rather than the outside. We say the egg cracks from the outside is the end of all life. It cracks from the inside is the beginning of new life. So we want to inductively lead somebody to a new conclusion when we do things like metaphors. So you wouldn't write a metaphor for yourself, but now you can. Now I go to my metaphor creator that goes in there and it creates the metaphors for me, and it will shift so I can literally design a complete personal breakthrough session for myself in minutes that transforms and upgrades my consciousness. Or if I'm working with somebody else, I can do everything I used to do in a 5-hour session in a single hour session, and oftentimes more powerfully if I want to. Or I could choose to still do it in the 5-hour session, design the session at night like we've always done in NLP, collect the information, design it at night, deliver the intervention the next day. I can still do that, but the intervention that I deliver is going to be stellar because now I can work with 20 different chatbots to help me to design the intervention rather than with me still being the guide, me still being the pilot. So my intuition, and that's still guiding it, but I can design it in a fraction of the time that it took me originally and with 100 times the impact. Let's down that. I'll say 10 times the impact.
Yeah.
10. Let's get realistic about that.
That's significant.
Yeah.
So who would you, this program is for individuals wanting to continue on their journey on their own, or is it for practitioners and master practitioners and trainers?
So what I do now is I'm training people in what I call transformational super intelligence. And everybody talks about super intelligence in the world of AI. They say that's when, AI surpasses human intelligence, which we've already got it working at PhD levels, surpasses human intelligence. And most people think of it as being operating on its own. But for me, super intelligence should be directed. So I teach people how to pilot the AI tools and chatbots to produce superior results in their life and help others to produce superior results in their life as well. And so when I train a coach today, it's very different than the way that I still want them to have the foundational tools. So I still will have the backbone. I have my course that is basically the backbone of an NLP training and a master level training taught in my way, my unique way. But now they are learning how to use the chatbots inside there as well to facilitate the transformations. I'm going to do the same thing. I've got a speaker's training that's coming up, which would be the equivalent of your trainer's training. And I'll teach it in Bali for 7 days. and
Nice.
they will learn not only how to transform their speaking on every level, but they'll learn how to use the chatbots to design, for when somebody comes out of the NLP trainers training, they come out, they've got a couple of presentations that are polished up, that are kick-ass, that have all the psychological tools from the platform woven into them. But then if they wanted, and they learned how to create modular training, so they can go out and create modules and stuff and put them together. But that's a lot of work to go out and design another presentation like that. And it's a lot of work to do. Now they can do it all with the chatbots. So the chatbots will design a kick-ass presentation with the phrase anchors, with the multiple embedded metaphor, with everything woven in, and they can design it in 10 minutes.
It used to be a long process.
That used to be a long process, right? Because when we're going through that training, what made people so good is they were spending so much time working on it, designing it, putting it together and stuff. Now we can design it all with all the bells and whistles inside of 10 minutes. They can have that presentation. Well, you think of what that does for their ability to get out there and deliver tons of presentation at scale. Or the same thing with designing their seminars, designing their retreats. They can do that in a matter of minutes. And the same thing, we would teach the business of training and speaking at the trainers training. Well, they can use the chatbots that I've created, what I call stacks of chatbots that will design their business with all the intelligence that I learned over my 30 years in terms of what goes into their branding, in terms of making the business an expression of your soul's purpose, in terms of, your value ladder or your customer journey that you take people on, where they get all of that output. I can work with somebody with a series of chatbots and they have it in an hour, what used to take months and months and months of mentoring, if not years, and they might not even get there with all that. So
it's almost like a plug and play business in a box. Almost.
It's a plug and play business in a box, plug and play transformation in a box, plug and play, breakthrough session in a box, plug and play everything in a box. And that's, to me, what excites me most about this, because where I see it going beyond this.
Yeah, where do you see it going?
Yeah, where I see it going is virtual reality experiences that we can step into that shift our consciousness around problems, around anything in an instant. So you come in with the problem, AI rapidly generates this virtual reality experience that you
in the moment generates it, right?
In the moment generates it. Yeah. And
my beautiful wife is a hypnotherapist down here, a counselor and coach, and she had 3 virtual reality goggles. So if someone came in with a snake phobia, for example,
right,
she would do the hypnotherapy, and then there'll be these VR goggles, and they were pre-programmed programs. But if it's like Total Recall, it's being generated at the time of the session based on the input in that moment. That's quite incredible.
Yeah, I see that happening, and I see it happening faster than we, than we expect, and very much like Total Recall in that he's stepping up, almost like the holodeck in Star Trek too, where you step into an experience and it becomes an experience that you're living, but it's re-imprinting you from a cognitive perspective so that the old problems are no longer problems. And I see that as being one element of it. But right now, en route to that, what I'm teaching people how to do is how to pilot super intelligence to get superior results. And what the net effect of that is, when I train a coach today, unlike we train people, they go through results, or we call it results and master results, but you call it practitioner, master practitioner. They go through those trainings and they would be able to design interventions for people at a certain output level. And it's really kind of a beginner level. Even, the way we always described it back in the day, it's like when you learn to drive a car, a manual transmission, you probably didn't do it perfectly the first time. You probably stalled the car out a few times, but you keep practicing and you get there.
Yeah.
And when people would come out of an NLP practitioner, master practitioner training, they know where the gears are. They know how to step on the pedals. So now all they have to do is go out and practice, and they'll get better and better and better. Now, when I train a coach, all they have to do is go to the chatbot that creates the multiple embedded metaphors for their intervention. And they've got bookends on their intervention that they're already created in seconds. So they're producing interventions at the level of somebody who's done it for 28 years, rather than somebody who's just beginning in it immediately out the gate.
Yeah. When's the trainers training, Chris? When's this week?
So our speakers training it's just speakers immersion. But it is, essentially it's the
speakers immersion. Yep.
Yeah. It's, we're doing it the 20th through the 26th of September, here in Bali. And yeah, and you would like, if you came into it, you'd recognize it. There were some things that I learned outside of the NLP trainers training that, that ended up coming into my speaking and stuff. I found that oftentimes people would come out of our old school NLP trainers trainings and they'd be kind of wooden and they'd be modeling so much that they weren't really alive and they weren't really bringing it to life. And that's a gross generalization. That's not everybody. And I still think it was the most powerful training of its kind on the planet.
I love it.
Like not to knock the training.
But it's okay.
Yeah, but there was so much more they could do in terms of, when I was watching T.R. Becker, when he would present he's raising his hands high, this hand, that hand, the audience was in unison with him about everything, which is rapport, right? And what we would think of rapport about connecting with the eyes and stuff, we'd have great instantaneous magnetic rapport with our audiences. But in terms of having the audience be in sync with each other and moving with each other, I didn't get that from NLP. I got that from modeling other speakers that were out there that were doing it at a really high level. So I've woven some of that in there, but the backbone of the speakers training is still the NLP trainers training essentially. Yeah. But then we're weaving in all the chatbots and we're weaving in all the AI so that people can replicate it over and over again.
There's a great speaker who runs speakers trainings in Vietnam and Southeast Asia a lot. And he used to travel with Robert Kiyosaki back in the day. And I'm trying to remember his name. And that's exactly what he teaches, is how to get that compliance and high five the person next to you. And does everyone want success? Say success. And then
all of that. That's what Harv Eker called it, suggestology. But from a rapport perspective, that's what rapport is.
Correct. I was trying to think of his name. You probably know him. Cal, if you have any questions, go.
Yeah,
I got one for
curious,
Chris before we.
I'm curious about the Bali lifestyle and running NLP trainings in Sydney is very different to running NLP trainings in Brisbane or Adelaide or even Las Vegas when we used to run NLP trainings in Las Vegas. Yeah. I know people that have gone over there and worked with you in Bali before. It has a very spiritual, calming and peaceful environment, Bali. And I wondered how that impacts the style of training and the experience that people have and generally where you see people coming from. Are they from the States? Are they from Australia? Are they from the UK? Are they from, where are they? Where are they from? What's the experience?
Australia was my biggest market back in the day. London was my second biggest market back in the day. So we still have people that will come from those places. We see probably more Aussies come out here than Yanks, than Americans. But we get a mix. But probably Australia would be a slightly larger, base. I'd like to, as we continue to grow, we pull from all areas, but it's not just like, while I'm teaching some of those trainings here in Bali, I'm also teaching in other places. Like next year, we have our billionaire bootcamp training that we run annually. And that's just basically me modeling billionaires and turning it into a training. And, so we're running that here in Bali this year, but we're running it in Vietnam next year. And I'll run it in a cool place in Vietnam. It'll be mostly imports. People will be coming in for it. Yeah. But then I'm going to run an adventure club where we do caving for 6 days out there, which I love doing things like that. And so for me, I love doing it wherever I do it. The Bali does have a special feel when you're doing the trainings. There's something magical about it. It's kind of like when you guys were probably still doing trainings in Hawaii, I imagine, back when you were working with Tad.
Finished up. They ran training. Where did they run trainings? Guatemala.
I went to Guatemala.
Their off-site training location was Guatemala.
Yeah. That was really
wow.
Cool. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of fun to go to different places. I like the idea of having an international school that hits different places because people like to travel. And so that's kind of embedded into my brand. I mean, the coolest place I ever ran a training was Tibet. That was out of this world. Phenomenal. And we used to run our adventure. We called it the Billionaire Adventure Club back in the day. And it was kind of our high end program that we sold for $50,000. And we'd run programs in Peru or in different places like that. What I've done now is I've kind of woven that architecture into the normal trainings so that people don't have to pay $50,000. They can just come to a cool place and do the training. And I think it's, I like doing that for the live trainings.
Nice.
You know, somebody said that like your lifestyle is the flavor of your existence. And I think, waking people up and having them travel to cool places, you know, it does make it, emotionally satisfying, and it adds more to the mix. There was a Jungian analyst that lived out here in Bali named Jeremiah Abrams. He was one of the foremost experts in the world on shadow work. And he passed away recently, but one of the things that he said, wherever he is, he always looks to use a little bit of the native transformation. So, and I like that idea. So here, like we would do our basic NLP training. I did that. And then I took them to, that 10 years was a very experimental period of time for me. So if somebody came and did a training with me during those 10 years, they didn't get the same trainings that they were new trainings in that, they here in Bali, they have a thing called waterfall purification, where you go to these holy waterfalls and you let it pour into the crown chakra, and it helps you to release any past karmic debt and reset yourself for if you're launching a new business or you're going into anything, you can wash things away, set your intentions. So I took people to that, and then I turned it into an induction so that when I went and did a program in London, I could take them through the waterfall purification induction.
Fantastic.
I turned it into a process, which was kind of cool. So I do look to use a little bit of the local magic. I taught a speakers training in Prague, and in Prague, at one point in time in Prague, they had 400 alchemists that were living there, because the ruler of Prague had all these debts and he wanted them to turn lead into gold, and he brought them all out there. And they were, they were living in the city of Prague, and everybody thought the alchemists were magic because they'd appear in one place and then appear in another place. What they didn't realize was that there were all these tunnels underneath the city that they were using to move around and stuff. And it wasn't until, the past 60 years or so, there were floods that revealed more of these tunnels. So when we did the speakers training, it was a master level training, not a speakers training, it was a master level training. I took them on tours of the alchemical tunnels and alchemy tours to learn about the magic of transformation. So, wherever we go, we look to bring in some of that magic.
The local culture, the local, the whole, New Zealand as well. There was a Huna trip to New Zealand as well, as you were talking. I was like, they absorbed the Maori culture there.
I bet that's cool. So you were doing so you would have been doing Huna and all that stuff. Yeah.
Back in the day.
Really? Yeah.
Welcome back, Cal. Chris, I want to backtrack a little bit, because going from understanding the mind, I love the mind, going from Club Med fun guy to traveling the world, creating, $3 million weekends. Were you groomed in life to have this sort of success, or what was your upbringing like? Did you have aspirations to? Yeah,
I wanted to do great things, but I think, my parents were divorced when I was 5. I always wanted to live with my father, but I wasn't. I was living with my mother growing up in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. And I think probably the need to win the love of my father was one of the driving forces that caused me to want to stand out. But there were things that I had natural affinities for, like being on stage. When I was 14, I played the Prince and Robert Rogers and Hammerstein's Cinderella for a children's group. And, a little kid came up and asked me for my autograph, and I just thought that was amazing. And then, my father was into Bruce Lee. And my father was a wrestler. So there was no wrestling at school at the time when I was there. So I got into karate, and that, and I was always driving to excel. But you look back, like I say, you look back and you see all these little things that divinely came together to lead you to where you are now today. I think all that stuff led to that. I mean, one of my favorite things, I wanted to be a martial artist. I wanted to be an actor. And last year, I got my first black belt when I was 21. I've got 3 black belts now. I've got a 5th degree black belt in Chinese Goju, a 1st degree black belt in Twin Dragon Kung Fu, and I'm up for my 2nd degree black belt in Gracie Jiu Jitsu in November. So I've got 3 black belts now. I did a movie last year called Black Creek that I was in, that's out on streaming services and stuff, with Cynthia Rothrock, martial artist. And I wanted to be in martial arts movies when I was a kid. And now I did this movie. We're going to do Black Creek 2 I was executive producer on it, and I was acted in the movie. Then we're doing Black Creek 2 next spring. So all the things that I wanted to do when I was a kid are kind of coming full circle. But I made the choice to be a speaker because acting seemed so hard, and it seemed to be at the time that there were just so many politics involved with it and stuff. And so I got into speaking, but now it's kind of come full circle. So when I look at my life now, I go, wow, there's a composite of all the things I wanted to do. I'm speaking, I'm leading, I'm teaching, I'm living in this beautiful place. I do jujitsu probably, at least once a day, sometimes 3 times a day. I'm doing movies. I'm doing, it's like, okay, this is all cool stuff.
So how did you not get in your own way to create this level of success? Because a lot of people,
I did
nearly get there, but they get in their own way, and it's doubts, it's whatever it is, sabotage, whatever label we want to use. How did you not get in your own way and allow it to just keep flowing and in that massive rise in the mid 2000s?
Yeah, I got in my own way for sure. So I remember at the time when all the stuff was going down with my business partner, and there was
before that, from 2002, 2004, you just, you're on that train heading up, heading up.
What I was going to say was I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, and he said, Chris, how do you think your life would be like if you stopped creating things with the right hand and fucking them up with the left? I said, how much better would your life be? And what he was referring to was just like, I got it my own way, and I didn't know. I was young. I was naive. Like business stuff, I was too naive, and I thought I was on top of everything. I was sharp with the contracts and stuff, but I didn't know that people would replace a contract or make it look like something else, and people would be deceitful. I didn't expect those things to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't. So that was pure naivety that was there. But then, going out and partying and stuff, the partying was clearly getting in my own way. Like I didn't realize it. I thought, what? I'm a Richard Branson type. I'm a free flowing kind of guy. I'm going to go out and do what I want to do. And so I was doing that. And so I was partying too much. And it like, I was still able to get up on stage. It wasn't a round stage because I considered my stages to be a sacred space that I wouldn't let any of that sort of stuff touch, but I would go out and do it. I didn't realize at the time that stuff could be used against me, because when we get into a relationship with somebody, is because things are going good, whether it's a romantic relationship or a business relationship. But at some point in most relationships, most romantic relationships don't go the distance, and many business relationships fall apart at some point. And when things start to fall apart, people are going to look for all the things that can be used against you. So the fact that I was going out was then turned as ammunition for being able to take over my company. So, and they had something to hook it on. Right. And so it was like, shit. So I did myself harm. I did myself harm in many, many places. I did my business partner in September 2009. So it was September 30th, 2009. He called me up and he said, I need you to come over to the house and sign some documents for taxes and for your child support, he said, because it was a child support day. So I had to go over it. He's like, and I need this side and this side. And he said, this one needs to be backdated. This one needs to be backdated. This one needs to be backdated for the taxes and stuff. What I didn't realize that he did was he replaced all our original contracts and put in place a false trail of documentation that made it look like I sold the company to him step by step, which hadn't happened. Yeah, I didn't realize that at all. And then he started making all these deals. He sold our coaching program off. That went over to the T.R. Vector's organization. Everything was being split apart. My trainers were let out of their contracts and able to train with our promoters directly on their own. So everything was ripped apart. My naivety, and maybe my attitude, my cockiness, who knows, all the things that went into it that would cause me to show up the way that I was showing up. But all of that did a tremendous amount of harm to me at the time. And those were the types of things that I had to look at when I told you I went into the Scientology. I was doing their life repair, was to look at what I do. Okay, I'm the one who failed to look at the contracts. I'm the one who failed to read what he was doing and understand that there was a reason why he was doing it. Why is he doing it that was different than maybe he was telling me? I'm the one who trusted that person like a family member. I'm the one who and I don't want to say let myself down, because it's not about beating yourself up.
Yeah.
We know that. It's not, because then if you're using a cause and effect to beat yourself up, then you're really still just being an effect, right? It's about taking personal responsibility for the areas where you did harm to yourself or your life situation. All of a sudden you look at it and you go, yeah, that's all me. That's all me. Because you're not going to change other people. They're going to do what they do, and people do what's in their nature. And people will do what's in their best interest as well. And when their best interest no longer aligns with your best interests, now you're going to have some problems. And if you've been not keeping your side of the street clean, that's going to come back and bite you.
Ammunition, as you said. Yeah.
I've got to,
I love this.
I've got to pose a question to you that was posed to me a couple of weeks ago. I was invited to the 50th anniversary of NLP. Robert Dilts put on an event online. It was pretty cool. And one of the questions.
Never met Dilts. I've just heard wonderful stories about him, but never met him.
He's great. Really nice guy.
Really good
Really
guy.
nice guy.
He's a really good guy. And he's one of those people that, despite how much success and how noteworthy his work is, he's still willing to sit and listen and learn from whoever's in front of him. So, but he
I think you just get the sense that he's got a good heart, you know?
He does. He does. And he posed the question to the group, and he said, and I never thought about it in this way, because people talk about modeling in NLP all the time. And when I was, under Tad's umbrella, all I wanted to do was model excellence within the Tad James company. And, a lot of that was Tad, a lot of that was even Connor, with the way that he did business. And, I looked at people of excellence that I would like to model. All of it was people in the NLP field. And he posed a question. He said, we really need to think as an industry, who's going to be the worthy next people of excellence that the NLP field are going to model, because that's the only way that it continues. It's the only way that it stays relevant. It's the only way that it continues to grow and expand. And I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, that's exactly right. The John Grinlers and Richard Bandlers of the world there was no one inside of NLP to model. They weren't modeling excellence from within NLP. They were looking outside of NLP and looking at people like Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson and those guys. And my question to you is, who would be worthy of modeling today? Who is of an excellent nature that we could pull those skills from, model them, and utilize them for the transformation that we're doing in this field?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think you're right. I think NLP for a long time has been largely self-referential, meaning they were modeling each other, and they were playing in a small bubble. Tad was the biggest player before we launched our company, and Tad was the biggest player in NLP, and so everybody was looking to model that. When we started doing, when I went out and looked at what Harv Eker was doing, and we were doing 10 times more in terms of gross revenue. We were driving 10 times more gross revenue, so we became the biggest player at that point. And I remember having a conversation with Richard Tan. Richard Tan is the owner of Success Resources. Yeah. And he became my promoter in Asia, and he's also Tony Robbins' promoter, Robert Kiyosaki's promoter. And so
Blair Singer was the trainer that I was trying to think of before, who's very good at it.
Yeah. Of course I know Blair. So I was talking to Richard Tan. We did an event. We were doing a breakthrough to success in Hong Kong, and we had, there was probably about 1,000 people that he put in a room in Hong Kong for that event. It was one of the first ones we did. And I asked him about Brian Tracy, because I was always interested in, I said, what do you think about Brian Tracy and his model? Because Brian would go and he'd do his keynote and he'd sell $100,000 of product, but it was product. So it was one off, one done, no deliverables, nothing like that after the fact. And he said, what you and Harv Eker are doing have put everybody else to shame. He says, not even Tony is doing what you're doing, which was really fascinating to hear from him. And he was Tony's promoter. So we were doing some really big things at the time, but that did not come from modeling people in NLP. And so I think I mean, it did originally, right? Because the whole foundation was NLP. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it did originally, but I had to look outside the model of NLP in order to expand. And I think sometimes the greatest, the greatest breakthroughs that we have come when we look outside the model. But just like we learn in learning strategies, for any of your own students that are watching this, because they're so like we learn in learning strategies, you want to learn enough until you've learned enough before moving on. And had I not done all the modeling in NLP that I did, that was critical to do all of that, to have that format. I mean, had I not been fortunate enough, albeit fallouts and all that stuff with that, had I not been fortunate enough to go there and model the structure of trainings, how to build modular trainings, the excellence that came out of his trainer's training, had I not done all of that, there's no way that I could have built the training organizations that I built and stuff. So I am forever grateful for that modeling. But the real modeling happens when we start looking outside of the field and we say, hey, let's bring this concept together with this concept. And then all of a sudden we've got something that's brand new. Now, I've been, away from the field of NLP for so long that I don't know as much what's happening in there. I hear names that come out of people that are teaching inside there and stuff. So I couldn't point to anybody inside there. What I'm modeling is I'm kind of following where I think the future's going. And that's why I'm modeling, I'm going out and every Friday. So when I teach my mentor calls, so basically what I do is I do 2 calls every Monday, Los Angeles time. It's Tuesday, Australasian time, but I'll do 2 calls. And the first call is a business building call where I'll use AI woven with neurohypnotics to help people transform their business and build their business fast. Then I teach another call right after that called Explosive Growth, where I'll just teach whatever I think is super cool. Maybe I've created a new chatbot that, like this last one, on the last Explosive Growth call I did, I created a chatbot that just shifts meaning. So all it does is it takes any event that you have unfinished things on, or any event that, or any problem that you have, it has a conversation with you until the meaning of the event is completely shifted in a way that propels you forward. That's its whole job, is just to do that. So I delivered that chatbot to them and I taught them how to use it and let them use it with themselves. On Tuesday, then I had another business building call where we were working on operations, building up AI operations centers so that you can manage multiple things at once. And then on Wednesday, I do a transformation call where I teach them a transformational process. And what did I teach them yesterday? It's not a process. It'll be a chatbot where it'll be something with AI that does the transformation for them. And it's slipping my mind right now. It'll come back to me, what I taught last one. But today, which is our Friday in Australasia, Thursday in the Americas, I taught our modeling call, and I do a modeling call every time. And so what we were modeling today was automation, AI automation, how to automate things. And we were looking specifically at the very best of the best in the industry in terms of automation. And I've created chatbots that do the modeling. So I can do a complete cognitive profile of somebody or a business in seconds that used to take, that took me years. When I was modeling Richard Branson, it took me years of reading books, of watching videos, of extracting information. And I can do it with the touch of a button now and get all that information. And people go, but is it right? But we know that doesn't matter. Is it useful is the question. And we can do it now, like in an instant. So who I look to model now, and we look who's worth modeling, may be a range of people. It's whatever skill I want to learn. And the modeling is much faster for me now. So if today I'm working on automation, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look and I'll talk to ChatGPT. I'll say, who are the best players in the industry? Who are the biggest players that have made this work for them? And then I'll reverse engineer that. And then if I'm looking at organization, because I'm also teaching right now, I'm teaching an AI operations mastery class. I'll teach this deep dive class online, and I'm teaching that class right now. So I go, who are the best people in the world that have made, Notion work as a platform, or Notebook LM work as a platform? And I'll do modeling of it. Then I'll download it. Then I'll turn it into processes that we can teach. So it's just like, putting excellence in a bottle over and over again for multiple different things. So I know that doesn't answer it directly, but it's like, who do I think are the best people? I don't think it's an individual today. I think we model whoever's doing whatever aspect of excellence we want most, and we download that and we build it in so that we literally, create a vault of excellence if it's in the online world, but we expand our mind from that way as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where can people find you?
We have, finding me is,
where can we find Chris? Where are you right now? Go.
We have a 30-day trial for our online AI programs, and people could, if people, yourselves included, you're welcome. Anybody that wants to do the 30-day trial, just send me an email at support@chrishoward.com. And we'll let you in for the 30-day trial, and you can come in and join us for our mentoring calls and stuff and get an experience of the things that we're doing. And
someone in the chat,
you guys are welcome as well to come in there and do it.
Someone who was watching today, there's already someone in the chat that's asking, how can I get access to your AI package and scripts? I'd like to buy them.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll pass that.
Yeah, and if you send me an email at support, let me know that it's from Connekt Coaching. So just say, hey, I was watching Connekt Coaching, and that way I know who you are. Where
the best price.
Yeah, for the best. Well, yeah, just do proper tracking as well. But it's like, and the trial's free. It's 30 days free of the mentor. So it's
support@chrishoward.com. Is that right?
Yep. And just let us know.
I'm putting in the chat right now, so anyone who watches the replay can see this in the chat. You've got a great website.
I've got a website called epiclife.ai. chrishoward.com is just kind of a landing page that we've got, but we've also got epiclife.ai, and there's a free membership level on epiclife.ai to the discovery level, and that has some of the chatbots in that we've built and stuff like that. Like I built one chatbot, guys, that just I built it all around quantum linguistics, and you go in and you talk to it, and it just uses it gives you one pattern after another, and you tell you your problem, and then all of a sudden you're thinking in a new way. It's wild.
That's on Epic AI, is it?
That's on epiclife.ai. Yeah.
Epiclife.ai. Cool.
Yeah. And where I teach how to, and the discovery level's free on there. And where I teach how to do it is in our mentoring calls. And once again, if you send an email to support@chrishoward.com, you say it's from Connekt Coaching, you say it's from these guys, I will give you a 30-day free trial of our elite level coaching.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, mate, we know how busy you are.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry I was running around last minute. It was like stuff, but I'm just thrilled to be here with you guys, and really great to meet you both.
Yeah, you
absolutely.
too.
Thank you very much for watching the Unplugged podcast with Kallum and Conor from Connekt Coaching. Hope you loved this guest this week as much as we did. Cal?
What we wanted to remind you of is that if you wanted to steal our forever business model, which is perfect for all sorts of businesses around the world, to start to build extra revenue in your business right away, get instant access by clicking on the description and going into the link below, watching the 9-minute video where we unpack everything. See you next time.